Okay, so once you've downloaded the data set that we're working with from the International Social Survey Program, as I showed you in this previous clip, that's where we are at here. So it's in my downloads. You can just click this in your downloads. This might look different for you if you're using a different browser, of course. And then it opens up in SPSS. So that's what I've done here already, just because my laptop is pretty slow otherwise. So here's it in SPSS. I just want to show you around because this is the first time that you may be seeing such a larger data set. And the thing that opens up first in SPSS is just this very, very long list of all the respondents. So there's a bunch of them. I just want to make you kind of show you around in what you're looking at here. So the default thing that opens up is the data view. That's not where we spend a lot of our time, as you may recall. Where we spend more of our time is the variable view here. And this is all the variables, so all the questions basically on the things that were measured about the respondents in the data. Let me make this a little bigger. So here's the variable names, and here's the variable labels, the descriptions of the variables. Here's the values. I'm just showing you these things. I know that you've seen these before, but maybe it'll kind of trigger your memory a bit. Here's the values. We can click these. We have this hidden button, right? Was always hidden also in the first lab session that we had. We can set this up. Changing this doesn't actually change the data, but it changes how SPSS sees the data. And the same with the missing variables, missing values over here. Okay, here we can set up if we wish the type of measurement it is. So SPSS, if you recall, distinguishes between scale, which is interval or ratio, and ordinal and nominal. And if it's not set up otherwise, it usually takes nominal as its default value, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it takes scale as its default. I'm not sure, but here it sets up a lot of these things as nominal. That's not necessarily the correct one. For example, here, we might say this is ordinal rather than nominal. So keep this in mind when you're making things like graphs and stuff like that. Okay, so in the instructions that you have open on your screen, most likely, you're asked to do a couple of things. First of all, it tells you just look around in the data set, see what you have here, and that's what we're doing here, right? So here's all the variables. It's a bunch of them, 245 to be exact. And the data view, there's even more of those. Let's see if we can reach the end here. So that tells us slightly up. So there's 45,993 people, individuals in this data set in different countries, yeah? So the first thing that we want to look at, just to explore the data a little bit, is the different countries that people were in. Let me check my notes here. Because there's a little trick to get that. So let's make a frequency table of the countries. We can do that through Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and then Frequencies. And under Frequencies, we can make this a little larger. That might make it easier. Another little thing that might make things a little easier to work with these larger data sets is to say right-click and then display variable names rather than labels, if you already know what the name of the variable is. Yeah? It just switches between this column here and this column there. So either V6, for example, or Q1C, third most important group, R identifies with, whatever that is exactly. Yeah. So for that, we can then find the variable, what was it called, country. And another little trick here is that we can type on our keyboards by just starting to type country. So that should bring us, see, I typed COU, and that brings us to country. This is a quicker way to find variables in a large list like this. These little things might speed up and make your life a little more bearable at this point. So we can just set up this country variable frequency table. Let's see if I wanted to have you do more. I don't think so necessarily, because of course we could do statistics here, but like an average for the country doesn't really mean much. Charts don't really mean much other than maybe a pie chart or a bar chart. But as you'll see, it's quite a lot of countries. So let's just click OK. And that opens up the output window. It opened it up on my other screen, so I'm just dragging it here. So here we see all the countries that we have in the data set. And that's just all the countries they have, right? So the Netherlands is here as well, as you see. You see that West and East Germany are still split up. This is just sort of path dependency. Of course, these weren't actual separate countries because the data is from, I believe it's 2003. yeah, 2003. It was gathered 2003 and 2005, I think, in that time frame. So it's kind of old data, but not that old. So Germany was already unified for quite some time at this point. This is just path dependency. And so one of the things that we'll be correcting in the next couple of steps is this. So there's a couple of other things that we'll do, but one of the things is this. This data and all the data in this sort of category, so these large-scale data, survey data, was generally collected not with any specific goal in mind. It's collected in a collaboration of universities to just pull resources and be able to pull off this large collection of data with all these countries. And you see this like at least 1,000 people per country, except for some exceptions here at the top here. And of course, that's very expensive to do that. It requires a lot of people involved. And so it has no specific goal, meaning that there's all these variables that are not there for any particular reason, but for you to kind of play around with and to develop your own research questions that you can try and answer with this data. And there's people who do whole careers on this type of data. They never go out to collect their own data, and that's totally fine. I encourage you to do the same, if you're so inclined, of course. Okay, so the next step in the instructions that you're asked to do, I wanted to clarify that a bit and kind of take you through it if you need it, because it's something that you haven't had to do yet, and that is to enter syntax. So let me just put up the instructions here. Here's the instructions that you have as well. Down here is what I'm talking about. There's a bunch of syntax. So I've put syntax in these big black outlined parts. So I'm just selecting this and doing copy, Control-C or Command-C, depending on your system. And then in SPSS, we go to File, New, File, sorry about that, come on, File, New, Syntax. And just as a refresher, syntax is basically, let's say it's the programming language behind SPSS. So what I'll do is, I'll just Control-V or Command-V, I suppose, on a Mac. I'm not sure, I never use a Mac. But you can just paste it here, and this kind of gives you the instructions for SPSS. So you don't need to understand what it says here, but I'll take you through it in a minute if you're interested, because it's actually pretty easy to figure out once you get the hang of it. It's not a complex coding language or whatever. It's just sort of simple instructions as far as programming goes. And I'm not a programmer at all, so and it's kind of fun to get once you get the hang of it, but mostly it saves you some time if you're doing bigger projects or projects where you have to collaborate. So here's the syntax. What it will ask SPSS to do, it hasn't done anything yet. We just copy-pasted some text, but it does recognize the commands. So it sees that, yeah, okay, so let me just make sure that this is in focus. These are comments, right? So comments start with a slash and then a star, an asterisk, and then whatever text with a dot at the end. The dot is important because the dot tells SPSS this is the end of that command. If I remove the dot here, it should actually, they improved this apparently. Okay, in the past it was the way that they would also make this a comment. Doesn't really matter. So that's comments. It makes it gray. So it doesn't do anything. It's just sort of information for us. So you see step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I wrote those things. It's nothing that SPSS uses. Then the next step will be to recode. It sees it as it recognizes it as a command. So it's dark blue, and that's commands. And then the black regular text, say, is the inputs for that command. So recode is something that SPSS does. In fact, it's also under the menus. It's under transform. And then we recode under these two. That's the recode command. So you can do this through Windows as well if you want to, but it's a lot more tedious. Give it a shot and you'll see what I mean. So recode country, so that's the variable that we're recoding from, and then we say value 2 will become value 1, value 3 will become value 1 as well. Why is this? Well, let's go to country here. Let's see where it is. Here it is, country. We are talking about the values here, right? So values, these are the values that we have in the actual data. So in other words, these numbers here, these numbers are ones, and the ones mean Australia in this case. That's how it's coded. You can see that If we go here as well, back to country, and Australia, you see, value 1 is Australia. Value 2 is Germany West. Value 3 is Germany East. As I said, we wanted to unify Germany because it is one country. So we're telling SPSS in our new variable that we'll create, value 2 needs to be 1. So value 1 will be Germany. But value 3 will also need to be 1. So people who have value 2 will get value 1. People who have value 3 will get the value 1. These are just numbers that stand in for some category, in this case Germany. Value 11 will make that number 2. Which one was 11? Well, 11 is the Netherlands. Okay, so our second country is going to be the Netherlands, and we'll call that value 2. Value 16, what was 16 will become value 3. What was 3? What was 16, sorry? 16 was Poland. Okay, so we're comparing Poland so far, Germany and the Netherlands. 18 will become 4. 18 is Russia. Okay. And then finally we have 6 will become 5. 6, the United States. That will become our 5th. And then we say into, and we say else. This is a code that SPSS recognizes. You see that it sees it and it makes it red for that reason. Else, any other value, in other words, will become value 0. And later on we'll make 0 a dummy variable, not a dummy variable, a missing value. Into something called country new. So we're making a new variable. I usually do it this way myself. You can also just say we could remove this and then it would change the data in the original variable country. I don't usually do it that way myself, and I instead make a new variable. In this case, I'll call it country new. I could have called this whatever, like literally whatever, or cucumber. It doesn't really matter. But we'll make it country new, just so that we know what we're talking about. So in other words, take these values, these first ones, from country and put them into country new. Yeah, that's what we're doing. The reason I'm making a new variable and not changing the original one is because if I make a mistake, and at some point inevitably I will make a mistake, then I don't have to kind of re-download the whole new data, the whole data set, and run all my procedures. So I think it's good practice to just make new variables within the data. There's no limit to this anyway, instead of kind of messing with the old data. So I'm keeping things intact as much as I can. Then there's a dot at the end of the command. Every command has a dot at the end, and then execute means run the stuff that's above here. That's how SPSS code just works. Okay, so let's do this first step. Run selection. Yeah. So you noticed how I did that? I did select the part that I want SPSS to actually do, and then I press the big green run button, or you can say run selection. And then it does it, yeah? All it does is just repeat the command, because you didn't ask it to produce output. Basically, the output window that you're looking at here is SPSS telling you what it did, and here's you telling SPSS what it needs to do, which is exactly the same. So as long as there's no errors, it'll just repeat what you said. Then the second step will be to give a label to it. So we could do that just here, just change it here. So by the way, let me just show you what happened here. We have a new variable at the bottom under variable view called country new. Okay, if we do a frequency table of country new, it's at the bottom. Okay, we just get this. We just get 0 is most of the people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You and I know that these are the countries that we selected. We know which ones, if you recall. But we'll make things a bit more easy to see in the next couple of steps. So we'll give some words to this. So instead of country new, it'll become called something else. And instead of numbers, we'll have the actual country names. So variable labels will be selection of countries recoded. Okay. So the command there was just variable labels. You notice there's no dot, and so we might also just put that like this. Does the same thing. And then we say execute. Yeah. I already executed it, but I'll do it again. Yeah. Okay, so that's giving it a label. Where you do that, if you want to use the visual interface, you see it's changed here. We can also just type here. Yeah, doesn't really matter what it says here. Now this appears if we do again the same frequency table Nothing has changed. It should show it at the top there. Yeah, you see it used to say country new, and now it says selection of countries. Recoded. The next step, and I'll try to speed things up a bit. Step 3 will give labels to those numbers. Yeah, we run this selection. Again, it just repeats it, but if we were to do the same frequency table again, okay, then we see that instead of this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it says other country. We give that's the name that we gave to number 0. Germany, unified this time, Netherlands, Poland, Russia, United States. Okay, so now we are pretty much done. All that we need to do still with this variable is to say, let's say that country new 0, the value 0, means that it's a missing value. In other words, it's not some data that we don't have, but in this particular case, it's data that we don't need to, they don't want to look at. So in the instructions also says we're comparing these 5 countries. If you have some reasons to want to compare other countries, by the way, this is totally fine. It's just that the answer key that you'll get is not going to be tailored to that, of course. The results will be different if you compare different countries for obvious reasons. So, but you're free to choose something different, or even use a different data set if you so prefer. It should work, yeah? So running this selection as well. So you see no errors, so nothing is wrong. And just to kind of complete this thing with syntax, as I said, we can go through analyze frequencies here and then do it again. But instead, we can also do frequencies, right? It shows you which commands are valid. Frequencies for country new dot. Run this part, does the same thing. Yeah. So I'm showing you this because if you collaborate with other people in a project like this, it can be helpful to send each other syntax rather than large data sets at some point, or data sets that kind of get out of sync at some point. So then using syntax might be quicker and easier and more reliable. This is why this might be a good idea. You see the difference here between the last 2 tables is that we have an other country variable still, as we had it before, same number of people in it as well, but now it is missing. Which means that if we would make like a, let's say we do a pie chart of this thing. I could have done this quicker through the frequency chart maker thing, but you know, let's do it through here. We need to set this up as nominal, and it is, okay. Slice by, okay. So this would be the syntax, by the way, for doing that in syntax. So if we were to copy paste this whole thing, copy and paste it into our syntax, would give the same result as the thing above, right? I mean, I know that this is a lot, so it specifies all the details. It's a bit more involved than doing a frequencies thing. Okay, so here's the graph. So this is how many people. It's not a very interesting pie chart, but there you go. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to show you in this little clip, because it's getting a little long for a clip. And that's it. So the next bit of syntax is over here in the instructions. So just copy this, copy, go back to your syntax. Paste it, select it, run it. No errors, no problems. The thing here is that what it does is it basically filters out all the people who are not in one of the 5 countries that we're comparing. The reason for this is mostly that it can be quicker. If you're on a slower computer, as I am at the moment, you can SPS can take a bit of time even for making something simple as a pie chart. You notice that it took it a couple of seconds to do it. That's not too bad, but if you do more complex things or very graphical intensive things, it can get pretty slow with the larger data set. So if you filter out stuff and remove stuff that way, you can. It speeds it up a little bit. That's all that we're doing at the moment. Maybe I'll see you in another clip. Otherwise, good luck with doing the workshop.